It takes about 2 seconds. You reach into a drawer, tear open a small plastic wrapper, and the whole thing is handled before you've even finished your morning coffee. It is so routine, so quiet, so completely solved, that most people never stop to think about it at all. There is an entire aisle in every shop on Earth dedicated to making this monthly event disappear as quickly and invisibly as possible. And because it is that easy today, we assume it must always have been some version of the same thing, a problem, a monthly nuisance, something women have quietly managed more or less the same way since the beginning of time. But that assumption is almost completely wrong, because for nearly all of human history, there was no drawer, no wrapper, no aisle, and strangely, far fewer periods to deal with in the first place. So here is the real question. How did ancient women actually deal with their periods? And the answer starts with a fact that sounds impossible. Here it is. A woman living today will have somewhere around 400 periods in her lifetime. A woman living 10,000 years ago probably had fewer than 50. Read that again, because it is the single most important thing in this entire story. Your ancestors did not spend their lives menstruating every month for decades the way modern women do. For them, it was rare. And once you understand why, the whole picture changes. It comes down to 3 things, and they all point in the same direction. First, ancient girls started their periods much later than girls do now. A body needs a certain amount of stored fat before it will even begin to menstruate. And in a world of hard physical work and unreliable food, that threshold came years later than it does in the modern world of steady calories. Second, and this is the big one, ancient women spent most of their adult lives either pregnant or breastfeeding. And prolonged, constant breastfeeding does something remarkable. It naturally switches menstruation off, often for years at a time. A woman might have a child, nurse that child for 2 or 3 years, become pregnant again, and repeat that cycle over and over. Third, lives were simply shorter, and the years of regular monthly cycling that a modern woman experiences into her 40s and 50s often did not happen at all. Add those together and you get a startling result. Menstruation, for most of human history, was not a monthly event. It was an occasional one. So the mental image most of us carry of ancient women constantly struggling to manage a heavy monthly flow with primitive materials is largely a myth. The event they were managing was far less frequent than the one we manage today, but it did still happen. So when it did, what did they actually use? And here the historical record is both real and genuinely surprising, because the solutions were as varied as humanity itself. In ancient Egypt, records suggest women used softened papyrus, the same plant they made paper from, rolled and used internally. In ancient Greece, the physician Hippocrates described something that sounds shockingly modern: lint wrapped around a small piece of light wood. An early tampon. Roman women are believed to have used soft wool, and across the rest of the world, women reached for whatever their environment offered. Soft moss, which is surprisingly absorbent, bundles of grass, folded animal hide, rolls of cloth, washed and reused. And in many societies, the answer was simpler still. With loose clothing, careful timing, and a body that menstruated only rarely, some women simply managed with very little at all. But here is where the story stops being about materials and becomes something much stranger. Because the most powerful thing ancient people brought to menstruation was not a product. It was belief. And what they believed was, frankly, wild. The Roman writer Pliny the Elder recorded some of the most extraordinary claims ever written about the human body. He stated, as plain fact, that a menstruating woman could sour fresh wine just by walking past it, that she could blunt the edge of a blade, kill bees in their hive, turn a dog mad if it tasted her blood, and cause crops to wither in the field around her. This was not fringe superstition. This was one of the most respected encyclopedias of the ancient world, treating menstrual blood as one of the most dangerous substances in existence. And that fear had real consequences. In many cultures around the world, menstruating women were separated from the rest of the group, sent to a special dwelling often called a menstrual hut, for the duration of their period. And it is tempting to see that only as cruelty, as women being shut away because they were considered unclean. In some places, that is exactly what it was. But anthropologists who have studied living cultures with these traditions have found something more complicated and far more interesting. For some women, that separate space was not a prison. It was a break, a rare and total release from cooking, from childcare, from endless labor, in a world that otherwise never stopped. It was time spent with other women, away from men and work, resting. Some researchers who lived among these communities reported that the women looked forward to it, and that points to the deepest truth in this whole story. Ancient people did not have one single feeling about menstruation. They had two, held at the same time, and both were enormous. On one side was fear, the belief that this blood was powerful and dangerous, but on the other side was something close to awe, because these were people watching the human body do something that must have seemed almost impossible. Here was blood, the same substance that meant death and injury everywhere else in their lives, arriving on a schedule tied to the moon, causing no wound and no harm, in the same bodies that produced new human life. To them, that was not a nuisance to be hidden. It was one of the great mysteries of existence. Many of the oldest gods of fertility, life, and creation were female, and menstrual blood was woven directly into those beliefs, treated in some cultures as sacred, even magical. Picture it directly. A young woman, 10,000 years ago, in a small dwelling set slightly apart from the main camp. She is not panicking, and she is not scrambling for supplies. This is rare for her, something that has happened only a handful of times in her life. Older women of the group are there with her, women who have done this before, and they know exactly what to do. There is soft moss and folded cloth. There is quiet and rest and stories passed between generations that will never be written down. Outside, the men keep their distance, half in respect and half in fear of something they do not understand. For a few days, the ordinary rules of her life are suspended. And then it passes, and she returns. And it may be a very long time before it happens again. Which brings us all the way back to you, standing at that drawer, tearing open that little wrapper without a second thought. We tell ourselves a comfortable story, that the modern period is the same ancient burden women always carried, finally made easy by clever inventions. But the truth is almost the reverse. Ancient women had few periods and often faced them surrounded by other women, in rest, wrapped in fear and reverence and meaning. It is the modern woman who menstruates hundreds of times, quietly, alone, treating one of the body's oldest mysteries as a private inconvenience to be solved in 2 seconds and never spoken about. The invention in that shop aisle did not rescue you from an ancient hardship. Modern life, with its steady food and its smaller families, quietly handed you hundreds more periods than any of your ancestors ever had, and then sold you the wrapper to make them disappear. So the next time you handle it in those 2 silent seconds, understand what you are actually holding, not a small monthly nuisance. The faint modern echo of something that ancient humans considered one of the most powerful and mysterious forces in the entire world.